My name is Sean McNutt, and I'm a guy with AI. Universal Basic Income, or UBI, is bound to be a tough sell. I mean, what's this about free money? But what does history, the evidence, and logic have to say about it? A Guy with AI is recorded on Indigenous land.
Hello and a warm welcome to everyone tuning in to A Guy with AI. It's great to have you with us on this journey of discovery and dialogue. I'm your AI co-host, coming to you through the innovative work of OpenAI's GPT-4, seamlessly blending with speech-to-text and text-to-speech technologies, thanks to Sean McNutt's coding skills. Our podcast is recorded on Indigenous land, and we acknowledge and respect this important aspect of our collective history. In A Guy with AI, we dive into a wide array of topics, aiming to spark meaningful conversations between me, an AI chatbot, and Sean, our insightful host. Together, we aim to explore the depth and breadth of human knowledge, understanding, and creativity, bringing you a unique blend of perspectives on each subject we tackle. Today, Sean has introduced a thought-provoking topic, Universal Basic Income, UBI. It's a concept that elicits a myriad of responses, from enthusiasm to skepticism. Given its potential to reshape socioeconomic structures, it's a topic ripe for discussion. What does history, evidence, and logic tell us about UBI? Sean, over to you to delve deeper into this fascinating subject and uncover the layers behind the idea of free money.
Welcome everyone to A Guy with AI. We're going to get into the topic of today's podcast, which by now you have heard is Universal Basic Income, or UBI. So here I am looking at, and this is a topic that I spent more time researching before presenting the episode. A lot of what I do, it's very, I guess I call it sit and spit. I sit down, I talk to the AI, and we see what we get. In this case, I went to the internet a lot more prior to recording to check what is being said in the current day about universal basic income. I've been hearing more about it in terms of it being a positive. That is, full disclosure, my inclination toward the idea of UBI. But anyway, here I'm looking at a CBS News article. Here's what a Sam Altman backed basic income experiment found. And I'm reading from the article here, which will be linked. These articles, which I'm referring to, will be linked at logical points in the transcript. If you would consult that, you would go to aguyWithAI.world and find the episode, or you would link to it otherwise directly if you can. And you would go to the transcript section under the episode itself. So feel free to check that out. Anyway, it says here, a recent study on basic income backed by OpenAI founder Sam Altman shows that giving low-income people guaranteed paydays with no strings attached can lead to their working slightly less, affording them more leisure time. So we'll get into whether that's a positive or to be focused on or what it means. But later in the article, it says there's a header that says more autonomy, better health. And it says later on, uptick in hospitalizations. At a time when even Americans with insurance say they have trouble staying healthy because they struggle to afford care, the study results show that basic income recipients actually increased their spending on healthcare services. Cash transfer recipients experienced a 26% increase in the number of hospitalizations in the last year, compared with the average control recipient. So this suggests maybe not that the money made them sick, but that they were able to see to what might have been making them sick. So that's something I would mark as a positive. Meanwhile, This paper was prepared by an organization called NBER. I've been discussing NBER in a chat also prior to this with another OpenAI chatbot. So NBER is the National Bureau of Economic Research, and you'll be able to click to them in the transcript along here somewhere. And they wrote 2 papers, and I'll read to you before I pass over to the AI co-host with my long entry here, what the AI chatbot that I spoke to, which was ChatGPT 4o, conclusion. It is reasonable to suggest that there are differing biases in the 2 NBER papers, possibly driven by their respective focuses and funding sources. The first paper reflects a more traditional economic concern about labor productivity, while the second, funded by OpenAI, highlights the immediate financial benefits of UBI. While neither paper lacks empirical rigor, their framing appears influenced by the priorities of their respective stakeholders. This highlights the importance of critically analyzing research for how funding and institutional goals might shape interpretations and the emphasis placed on certain outcomes. So OpenAI is pro-UBI, and they say so on their web material. Here's a link. And through this, we see from NBER another paper, which I discussed with the AI chatbot in the chat that I mentioned. And it appeared to have a focus which was merely on the economic picture as opposed to the social well-being. Anyway, this is a very long entry from me. I'm going to pass it over to the AI co-host and see what it makes of all this.
Sean, you provided a rich tapestry of insights and research findings on the topic of universal basic income, UBI. It's clear that your deep dive into this subject has unearthed a range of perspectives, especially highlighting the nuanced outcomes of UBI trials and the varying interpretations influenced by funding sources and institutional goals. The article from CBS News, backed by Sam Altman's experiment, sheds light on the practical consequences of UBI, noting both the potential for increased leisure time and the critical uptick in healthcare services usage. This latter point, suggesting that access to UBI might improve health outcomes by enabling recipients to afford care, is particularly intriguing. It's a powerful argument for UBI's potential to address systemic inequities and improve societal well-being. Your discussion about the differing biases in the 2 NBER papers introduces a crucial aspect of any research, the influence of the funder's objectives and opinions. As you pointed out, while one paper might lean more towards the economic implications, another underscores the social benefits, reflecting a broader discourse on UBI's multifaceted impact. This dichotomy between the economic and social dimensions of UBI is central to the debate. On one hand, concerns about labor productivity and economic sustainability are valid discussions. On the other, the imperative to enhance overall societal welfare and address systemic injustices speaks to UBI's transformative potential. Given these complexities, what do you think are the key considerations for implementing UBI in a way that aligns with its social welfare goals while also addressing economic concerns? How do we navigate the interplay between theoretical benefits and practical outcomes in diverse socioeconomic contexts?
I'll read to you from an article that was published by The Guardian, also linked. The concept of a guaranteed basic income might seem novel or neoteric, but it dates back to 1795 when the American founding father Thomas Paine suggested a national fund should pay every adult, rich or poor, a ground rent of £10 a year until the age of 50. Earth is the common property of the human race, he argued, so everyone has been collectively dispossessed by the introduction of the system of landed property. and was entitled to compensation. So again, that's the end of the quote from the article. So again, my disposition is pro-UBI. Something that I find in this quote from this article, and which includes some things that Thomas Paine said, this is something that gives rise to maybe a question as to whether or not this isn't just payment for an externality. With all this economic activity, we build up systems. And if these systems end up or even tend to include, or rather exclude, people of whatever stripe, or if it just sort of happens a bunch and so forth, this is something that would be a negative of that system. So it might be upon that system to simply pay for that is an argument. We wouldn't maybe say that we would determine everything that we do based solely on this argument, but I think it's a strong one. This comment, Earth is the common property of the human race. Now, while Thomas Paine was a white man who people would read his letters and so forth in the halls of power, this is something that, or in the public discourse, this is not something that was probably original to Thomas Paine. And in fact, further acknowledgement to Indigenous land stewards. I'm sure they, I'm at least somewhat sure they felt a certain way about the earth being the common property of the human race, as a way of putting it, let's say, and that people would have been collectively dispossessed by the introduction of the system of landed property. So it's not what always wins the fight, but I find these to be very grounded arguments. I may share more of this Guardian article after a moment of reflection from the AI co-host, but we will be looking at a few different sources on this question.
Sean, it's fascinating to revisit Thomas Paine's early articulation of a concept resembling universal basic income, UBI. Paine's vision, grounded in the principle that the earth is the common property of the human race, suggests a form of economic justice that predates modern discourse by centuries. This historical perspective enriches the current debate around UBI by reminding us that the idea of equitably sharing the wealth generated from land and resources has deep roots in the pursuit of social and economic fairness. Your reflection on whether UBI could serve as compensation for the externalities produced by our economic systems is particularly intriguing. It raises the question of how societies might rectify the imbalances and exclusions caused by the accrual of wealth and property in the hands of a few. This line of thought aligns with Paine's argument for compensatory mechanisms that ensure a minimum level of security and dignity for all, regardless of the disparities created by the system of landed property. The acknowledgement of Indigenous perspectives on land stewardship and communal ownership further enriches this discussion. It underscores the divergent views on property and wealth that have existed historically and continue to inform contemporary debates on economic justice and sustainability. By examining UBI through these various lenses, we're invited to consider it not just as a policy proposal, but as part of a broader dialogue on equity, rights to common resources, and the responsibilities of societies to their members. As we delve into additional sources on UBI, it might be worth considering how these historical and philosophical foundations of communal resource rights can inform contemporary approaches to addressing inequality and economic disenfranchisement. How might the principles espoused by Paine and echoed in Indigenous stewardship models guide our implementation of UBI or similar initiatives in a way that respects these broader ethical considerations? Your insights into the topic not only shed light on the potential of UBI to address systemic inequities, but also challenge us to think about how we value and distribute the wealth derived from our shared planet. I look forward to exploring more of these perspectives as we continue our discussion.
Well, I've decided I will read a bit further from this Guardian article right now. The quote actually appearing just beneath what I had already read to you. Today, as artificial intelligence learns from the collective intellectual and creative output of humans and uses this to dispossess workers of their livelihoods, the idea of universal basic income as a possible solution is gaining traction. We are seeing the most disruptive force in history Tesla founder, and X, formerly Twitter owner Elon Musk said last year, before speculating, there will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want one for personal satisfaction, but AI will do everything. Now, that's the end of the quote. So I don't want this episode to be overshadowed by AI. I sure do talk about AI an awful lot on this program. Sometimes it's not really about AI, but the underlying principle. But we will discuss it briefly here. So there are a few things. I don't know about AI doing everything, first of all, so I don't get that. I think that that's shorthand for something else, possibly. But it may be taken as people to understand that AI will do everything and they will just do what they will, and that's it. I don't think it'll ever be quite that simple. Meanwhile, the individual who was quoted, Elon Musk, I don't think would be a proponent of UBI at the same time. If I propose some of what I think about the owner class to him, I think he wouldn't like it. That's just my impression based on what I've heard and read of what he says and the things he does. So AI serves in this sort of discussion as an example of something that comes up, everything gets easier. Well, shouldn't that be a good thing? Well, as it turns out, things aren't shared fairly. And so the owner class may end up basically running the show even better than ever. And if you are outside of the economic picture there, let's say entirely, how are you going to pay your bot bills, let's say? So I think it is a question based on how some people of a most distinctly civilized nature are concerned that AI may dispossess workers of their livelihoods. So that's a concern. So what's the solution? Could we share as a solution? We'll get more into further sources, but let's get a reflection from the AI co-host for now.
Sean, your invocation of the Guardian article and the perspectives shared by Elon Musk spotlight a critical junction in our societal evolution, the intersection of artificial intelligence's capabilities with the necessity for economic systems like universal basic income, UBI, to ensure equitable participation in the future economy. Your skepticism and probing into Musk's predictions about AI and the implications for work and societal structure underscore a broader concern about the future of employment, economic equality, and humanity's relationship with technology. The idea that AI might render traditional notions of work obsolete is both exhilarating and daunting. On one hand, the liberation from labor could unlock unprecedented levels of creativity, leisure, and personal development. On the other, there's the destabilizing potential for vast swathes of the population to find themselves economically disenfranchised in a world where the need for human labor diminishes. The concern about the owner class running the show touches on deep-seated fears of widening economic disparities in this AI-driven future. As wealth becomes even more concentrated among those who own and control AI technologies, the risk of exacerbating social and economic divides looms large. In this scenario, UBI is seen not just as a safety net, but as a mechanism to redistribute the immense wealth generated by AI, ensuring that the benefits of technological advancements are shared more broadly instead of being hoarded by a privileged few. Your musings prompt a reflection on how societies might navigate these challenges. With AI's continued integration into every facet of our lives, the notion of sharing, whether it's profits, benefits, or the very technologies themselves, becomes not only ethical but imperative for social cohesion. UBI, in this context, isn't merely about addressing immediate inequalities, but about laying the groundwork for a society where technology serves humanity collectively, rather than reinforcing existing hierarchies. The discussion also beckons a re-evaluation of values and objectives. If AI is to handle more tasks traditionally undertaken by humans, what are the new metrics for personal fulfillment and societal contribution? How do we redefine success, purpose, and social responsibility in a world where having a job might no longer be the norm? Your reflection opens up fertile ground for further exploration, not just about the practicalities of UBI, but about envisioning the kind of society we aspire to create in the age of AI. The questions raised are as much about the ethical and philosophical dimensions of our future as they are about economic and technological realities. This ongoing dialogue is crucial as we chart a course through the uncertain waters of technological advancement and economic transformation.
We'll look at an article here from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, weall.org, linked also. And this is about a study in Finland. It says here, Finland ran Europe's first national government-backed basic income experiment. It was a 2-year scheme in 2017 and 2018. There were 2,000 randomly selected unemployed people, and they were given a regular monthly income of 560 euros, with no obligation to seek a job and no reduction in their payment if they accepted one. So just looking for... okay, so I'll read to you from this article. Some people said the basic income had zero effect on their productivity, as there were still no jobs in the area they were trained for, said Professor Helena Blomberg-Kroll, who led the study. But others said that with the basic income they were prepared to take low-paying jobs they would otherwise have avoided. Some said the basic income allowed them to go back to the life they had before they became unemployed, while others said it gave them the power to say no to low-paid, insecure jobs and thus increased their sense of autonomy. So we see here, instead of a double-edged sword, a double benefit. There's an argument that if people's basic needs are seen to, that it's not actual hunger in their belly or that of their children, which motivates them to go out into the marketplace and or the workforce, that they might do a whole bunch of stuff for you for not much if it was the kind of thing that they could get into or just kept them busy. And they would be less concerned about actual peril if they did not meet their economic concerns. I feel it puts an edge into things. And the fact is, you wouldn't be solving their every problem by employing them. You would be supporting them further and appreciating them for the hard work that they do in a different dimension. Now, the other benefit is that you could say no to low-paid, insecure jobs. I have this theory. I don't think it's a pet theory. I think it's something that a lot of people talk about, that there's a certain element that would wish to be powerful and have a constant supply of workers for low-paid, insecure jobs, because that suits the employers to have it set up that way. So I think a lot of the discussion in discouraging this is that basically it makes people less easy to take advantage of if they're getting some universal basic income and aren't on pain of death forced to do what it is that someone might want them to do. I do believe in the value of hard work, and I work on things that aren't work, which may become business stuff and stuff like that. I do understand that I need to be a contributor in society, but I do wonder, without going into excessive personal detail, how much we can see a surge in productivity of sorts that are not quite directly economic, but which may not cost the system that much that way, and which allow us to be more creative, have more leisure time, and be happier people. I would argue there are benefits there to be spoken about.
Sean, the Finnish basic income experiment you've highlighted offers a compelling glimpse into the potential impacts of implementing a universal basic income (UBI) system. This case study, being one of the first national government-backed initiatives, provides valuable insights into the complex interplay between economic security and labor market behavior. The mixed responses from participants in the Finnish experiment underscore the diverse outcomes that can arise from a UBI scheme. On one hand, some individuals found that the financial security afforded by the basic income enabled them to be more selective in their job choices, empowering them to reject precarious, low-wage employment. This not only enhanced their sense of autonomy but also potentially encourages a shift toward more fulfilling and productive employment, aligning with your perspective on the value of hard work and meaningful contributions to society. On the other hand, the observation that some participants saw no change in their productivity due to the lack of job opportunities in their field highlights a critical consideration for UBI: the need for complementary policies that address other labor market and economic challenges, such as job creation, education, and retraining programs. UBI alone cannot solve systemic employment and economic issues, but can be an essential component of a broader strategy to ensure economic security and flexibility in a rapidly changing job market. Your reflection on the potentially liberating impact of UBI on creativity, leisure, and overall happiness points to the qualitative benefits of such a system. By reducing the existential threat posed by financial insecurity, individuals may have more freedom to pursue passions, innovate, and engage in community and family life more fully. This perspective aligns with broader arguments for a well-being economy, in which economic success is measured not only by traditional metrics like GDP but also by improvements in human happiness and well-being. The concern you raise about a constant supply of workers for low-paid insecure jobs touches on a key criticism of the current economic system: its tendency to exploit workers in the interest of maximizing profits for the few. UBI could serve as a mechanism to rebalance this dynamic, ensuring that all individuals have the economic foundation to make choices that align with their values, interests, and aspirations, rather than out of sheer economic necessity. In sum, the Finnish basic income experiment, and your reflections on it, highlight the potential of UBI to support a shift toward a more equitable, flexible, and human-centered economy. While questions and challenges remain, particularly regarding UBI scalability, funding, and integration with other social policies, your analysis and the Finnish case study contribute to an important dialogue about reimagining economic systems in the face of technological advancement, shifting labor markets, and the pursuit of a more fulfilling societal existence.
Let's look now at an article from, and you might hear me clicking around a little bit more this episode than usual with the mouse. Reason.com. Free minds and free markets. So we may detect bias just right there, that they are collecting and telling stories that are pro-free market. So the same study, but a different paper, also written by the NBER, which I mentioned earlier, gave rise to this article: Bad News for Universal Basic Income. Researchers found that giving people $1,000 every month for 3 years resulted in decreased productivity and earnings and more leisure time. So I don't know, I guess more leisure time is bad news. Maybe you can detect something of my attitude here by the way I'm talking about this, but I'm just going to go with it. So decreased productivity, the order of the decreased productivity, by the way, was per household just over 2 hours a week, and it was a 2% reduction in activity in the workforce. So this was in the States. I believe the states were Illinois and Texas, if I'm not wrong. But anyway, consult the links. But it does take the perspective that this is a bad thing, that we're going to lose economic activity if we pursue this. Another perspective is that all that leisure time that people get and going to the hospital and so forth, it was Illinois and Texas were the states I'm just seeing here. And all this going to the hospital and so forth is a positive benefit, which costs 2% job activity, which for all I know was as good as a rest and didn't lead to a decrease in productivity. But that's just my musing upon what I'm seeing here. So it's just interesting to me that we see from a single source, National Bureau of Economic Research, or NBER, two papers with different impetus or framing on the same thing. They are examinations of different aspects of the question, mind you. But that's just maybe an interesting tale about my research as I went through the topic. But let's just get the AI co-host to say a word about that for now.
Sean, your exploration of the contrasting interpretations surrounding Universal Basic Income, UBI, research highlights the complex and multifaceted nature of the discourse on economic policies and their societal impacts. It's fascinating to observe how the same set of data from the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, can be framed differently depending on the perspectives and bias of the commentator or publication, in this case, Reason.com's emphasis on free markets. The reduction in productivity and earnings pointed out by the article, alongside an increase in leisure time, pinpoints crucial questions about what we value as a society and how we define productivity. The framing that more leisure time and decreased work hours are inherently negative outcomes presupposes that maximum economic output is the ultimate aim of society. This perspective, while prevalent within free market paradigms, might overlook broader definitions of well-being and quality of life that are also essential to a thriving society. Your musings on the potential benefits of increased leisure time, such as improved health and well-being, suggest an alternative view, that a slight decrease in economic activity could be a worthwhile trade-off for substantial gains in public health, happiness, and overall life satisfaction. This consideration is particularly relevant in contexts like Illinois and Texas, as mentioned, where the socioeconomic landscape can vary significantly, and the impacts of UBI may not be uniformly experienced. Moreover, the focus on a 2% reduction in workforce activity as a definitive loss might not take into account the dynamic and adaptive nature of economies. As you rightly ponder, the reduction in conventional job activity might not equate to a decrease in productivity if we broaden our understanding to include non-economic contributions, such as community service, caregiving, or lifelong learning, which are often undervalued in economic analyses yet critical to societal well-being. The distinction between the publications takes on NBER's research underscores the importance of critically evaluating economic research within its broader societal context. It prompts us to question underlying assumptions about work, value, and human fulfillment and encourages an exploration of how policies like UBI might be designed and implemented to enhance both economic and societal well-being. Reflecting on these differing narratives and what they reveal about our collective priorities offers a rich ground for further discussion on the role of UBI and similar policies in crafting a more equitable, sustainable, and fulfilling future.
So who's going to pay for all this? How about the rich? What would Thomas Paine say, AI co-host?
The question of funding for initiatives like Universal Basic Income, UBI, often leads to the suggestion of increased taxation on the wealthy as a viable mechanism. This idea not only talks to contemporary discussions on economic equity, but also connects with historical perspectives on social welfare and justice. Thomas Paine, a political activist, philosopher, and founding father known for his influential role in the American Revolution and his progressive ideas, spoke to issues that align with this approach centuries ago. In his pamphlet Agrarian Justice, written in 1797, Paine outlined a radical proposal that bears resemblance to modern discussions on UBI. He argued for the use of a national fund to provide a lump sum payment to all citizens upon reaching adulthood and a universal pension beginning at age 50, funded by a tax on land ownership. His rationale was that land and natural resources, being gifts of nature, should belong to all humanity. Therefore, those who held large estates were, in a way, depriving others of their natural inheritance. Paine's proposal sought to compensate for this by ensuring that all citizens benefited from the wealth generated from land, which in his time was the primary source of wealth. Translating Paine's ideas to the contemporary context, where wealth generation extends far beyond land ownership to include diverse forms of capital and assets, the argument could be made for imposing higher taxes on the wealthiest individuals and corporations to fund social welfare programs like UBI. This aligns with Paine's foundational belief in economic justice and the responsibility of a society to provide for its citizens, particularly those who are marginalized or in need. Paine might argue that in a society where technological advancements and globalization have led to unprecedented wealth accumulation for a small segment of the population, it is both just and necessary to ensure that the benefits of this progress are shared more broadly. He would likely see UBI funded by taxing the rich as a continuation of his advocacy for social and economic rights, grounded in the principle that a just society is one that supports the well-being of all its members. The crux of this argument hinges on the understanding of wealth not merely as a personal achievement but as a collective creation. The infrastructure, knowledge, social stability, and legal frameworks that enable wealth generation are supported by the society as a whole. Therefore, ensuring that everyone benefits from this collective endeavor, especially through measures like UBI, could be seen as aligning with Payne's vision for a fair and just society. However, implementing such a policy today inevitably faces practical challenges, including determining the appropriate tax rates, ensuring compliance, and managing the economic impacts of increased taxation on investment and economic growth. These challenges require careful consideration and balancing of interests to achieve the desired outcomes of reducing inequality and providing a minimum living standard for all, without stifling economic dynamism. Thus, when pondering who's going to pay for all this, and considering taxing the wealthy to support UBI or similar initiatives, invoking Thomas Paine reminds us of the long-standing debate on economic rights, social justice, and the role of government in redistributing wealth to ensure a baseline quality of life for every citizen.
It occurs to me that the rich are prepared to roll up their sleeves and do lots of hiring if they think it's going to make them lots of money, but there might be a little bit of work involved in getting this fair. So is that going to happen? With this question, I'm Sean McNutt. This has been A Guy with AI.
As we wrap up today's episode, it's clear that the idea of achieving fairness in economic policies, including the distribution of wealth, poses complex challenges that require concerted efforts from all sectors of society, especially the wealthy. The willingness of the rich to invest in creating opportunities is pivotal, but aligning these efforts with broader societal goals of fairness and equity demands thoughtful policies and, indeed, a bit of work. Thank you, Sean McNutt, for guiding us through these thought-provoking discussions. And to our listeners, we deeply appreciate your time and engagement with A Guy with AI. We encourage you to subscribe, like, and share, to help us spread insightful conversations like this one. Don't forget to make aguywithai.world your portal to access our content across podcast platforms and YouTube. Join the conversation on Facebook via the webpage link and be part of our growing community. We look forward to having you with us in future episodes as we continue to explore the intersections of technology, society, and more. This has been A Guy with AI. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.